Good morning, people of the internet. You're listening to Debi Radio 79.5 FM, a podcast where we discuss the movie Grosse Pointe Blank, 1 minute at a time. I'm Dev.
And I'm Hugh, and on today's show we are looking at minute 65, in which our hero Martin Blank is busy talking to his psychiatrist on the phone one more time.
And joining us on today's show for the last time this week, but hopefully not the last time for the show, we have Dr. Rayna Denison. Welcome back, Rayna.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It's been a blast.
Very welcome. It has absolutely been a joy. Here we are. So you obviously were not with us for our the earlier parts of the film with Oatman. So would you like, Rayna, to comment on the whole business of the assassin and the psychiatrist? How's that for a trope?
I'm sure you guys have covered this already in other parts of your podcast, but obviously there's a bit of happy coincidence here with The Sopranos coming out the same year as Grosse Pointe Blank. So two quite closely timed releases where psychiatry and criminality come into contact. I suppose there are earlier examples of this as well, things like Silence of the Lambs, where we get criminologists working with criminals and we start to see some of these tropes coming through film and TV, are really important to what's going on here. But the way this is played for comedy is just genius. And I think we're about to get to one of those moments.
I think a big part of the genius is the casting.
Oh, yeah. Alan Arkin, just all day long, he's great.
The thing is, I feel like because we've looked at this fourth draft script that we found online floating around, and the original description of this character is radically different.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, so
tell me more.
So he's much more of a 70s like buck fringe jacket, ex-hippie, ex-cowboy type. Right?
I mean,
it's
it
almost
is
Clint Eastwood.
Yeah, it's Twin Peaks Day today, right?
So, yeah, right.
Yeah.
We should call out that the description is almost verbatim the psychiatrist in
Dr. Jacoby.
Yeah.
Oh,
Dr.
wow.
Jacoby, yeah.
Oh, yeah, of course, today. And we're recording this on the very day that is the anniversary of not the first episode, but the dialogue that Agent Cooper speaks in the first episode of Twin Peaks when he drives in. But yes, it's almost word for word. It looks like Dr. Jacoby on the page, but the dialogue is more Clint Eastwood. It's more kind of like an older era of American action hero.
Mm-hmm.
And of course,
I would agree with that. Yeah,
that they flipped that out completely by the moment Arkin walks in. I mean, I keep wondering if they even bothered to how choose a costume for him, or if they just said just come in a suit, dude. It just looks like he's Alan Arkin, right? This is like how you think of Alan Arkin.
And it's so funny because the way he's framed in this particular sequence, he could be a judge, he could be a lawyer, he could be a psychiatrist. It's not necessary for him to be a psychiatrist, except what he says couldn't come from anyone else. Like no other kind of relationship. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And that desk, we mentioned it in the previous episode, is so ridiculously huge.
Oh, it's huge, absolutely massive. Yeah,
who has a desk like that?
Yeah, it feels like the one area where the set dressers really got to play was with the desk and what's on the desk, and it features so prominently in several sequences in the film, and it's just on point.
Yeah, and this time around, so in previous conversations that Martin's had with him, it's clear that Arkin's character Oatman does not want to be there. I mean, he literally described himself as being held hostage, right? However, the distance of being on the other end of the phone allows Arkin to play the character now in a very different way. Oatman's now out from under the cosh. He can sit there. He's relaxed. He's having lunch. Right? He's eating a burrito.
Yeah, I was going to say, we should actually speak to Oatman's lunch, because I particularly love the napkin tucked into the shirt. I thought that was a beautiful touch. But also, it's the late 90s. Sat at your desk eating a burrito is, especially for, somebody like this, a professional white-collar worker, it's something I think you would really only see in California, right? And we kind of talked about how like Oatman and his office is kind of amorphous. It could be anywhere, but that little touch really positions it and places it, in a way that nothing else he does or says really does.
I mean, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to agree and say that I think there's something really interesting as well in the way that that whole scene is shot, because it's almost slightly from below. I think slightly from below, looking up at him. So it starts maybe slightly down and then goes slightly up. So he keeps moving around in our estimation, and where in terms of where the camera is positioning him. So his lunch becomes an almost central focus in what the camera work is framing. Yeah, that and an open book that's sitting next to him as he's eating his lunch. So this is a conversation that's all about disturbing him and disturbing what he was supposed to be doing. And he's giving us trite things, or giving Martin Blank trite things to say. Like he's just saying whatever he wants to say to get rid of him, because his focus is somewhere else here. I love that about how what we're seeing doesn't match what is being said quite often in this, or it contrasts it slightly at least.
I mean, this is absolutely the thing, isn't it? It's having forced him into a relationship, Martin doesn't get what he wants out of him. Oatman gets to stand back, sit back here and go, screw you, I'm doing me right now. Sorry, I'm just going to give you any old pablum, any old pap. That it cook. What did they say in America? Fortune cookie wisdom, right? And the fact that Martin is cut back to Martin in his room, still camera, Martin on the move, cut to Oatman, camera on the move, but camera also canting, tilting as it goes around as well. The disturbing, that lovely kind of American cinema tradition of, well, it goes right back to German expressionism, doesn't it? That whole kind of, things are strange and weird. Cut back to Martin in the middle of his room, what? And then walks over to the mirror and confronts himself once more. I mean, it's just beautiful. It's just gorgeous. And again, we have that noir, that noiry thing of the LA office. Once again, we have the blinds down and the big leatherback chair, and like you say, he could be a judge. He could be, and in fact, with the napkin, he looks like a judge, right?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that's deliberate. Martin wants a father figure. He wants advice, but he also wants to be judged because nobody. Nobody. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? This entire film, he's a guy who's been sanctioned to do murder and now does it unsanctioned but professionally, and you can see he's got a problem with it because he keeps saying, "Oh, I don't do that."
Yeah. It's not me.
Yeah. Like, when she offers him the French job to blow up another Rainbow Warrior, he's like, "What do you think I am?" Like, dude, you're a mercenary. Like what? But dog, I'm offended. You'd think, just this whole list he won't do. And you're like, what's going on with you, man? You clearly don't want to be in this profession anymore, really, do you? And it's just going to be a matter of time before he gets out. But I also wonder if Oatman genuinely, because early in the film he fears for his safety. I wonder if at this point he's realized that there's a chance Martin might actually change, and therefore he will be out from under the caution. He himself, as a psychiatrist, will be safe. Because earlier in the film he's genuinely scared of Martin.
I think there's also an element of speaking to Martin over the phone at a distance is much more comfortable for people. It's his physical presence that makes people uncomfortable. We see this with Marcella, right? Like how she interacts with him over the phone versus the scene where they're together in person are very, very different. And I feel it's the same with Oatman. I think there's still, there are some elements where Blank is trying to reach out to Oatman over the phone, or where, Oatman is not engaging, or is, famously, like, or notably, I should say, the next time he speaks to Oatman, where it's all like Oatman's in the middle of seeing another patient, and that's kind of very, very messy. But when they're actually engaged on a phone call, I think it's a lot easier for Oatman to be himself, be a professional, because he's not faced with Blank's presence.
But then, see, this is the thing I find interesting. If people like, so this comes back to something you said earlier in the week, Rayna, where Blank doesn't want to admit he needs a network, he needs a team, he needs a support network, and he's got Marcella and he's got Oatman. But I do find it interesting that both Marcella and Oatman, that, as you say, Dev, that business of being scared and not scared. This is a man who can kill, but
and does so.
Right. And yet they will treat him in this manner when he's at a distance. Sure, this suggests that they feel that the risk is calculated, right? There's a really calculated risk. They feel like they can rely on him to buy into their BS over the phone. Like, they can speak convincingly to him. But actually, once he's in front of them, he's a fit human lie detector, right? He looks at you and he knows.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think that's really interesting, because you have, in this conversation and in the ones with Marcella, a kind of a gentle ribbing of him all the way through the movie, all the way through, where his problems are made absurd by the things that people are bringing to him. So Marcella wanting him to go to his reunion, and him asking how this is possibly something that he would ever want to do, and then somehow Kismet makes it happen. She figures out a way, basically, to guilt trip him and kind of convince him to go and do this at just the right moment. But I think there's a mirror. Again, this film is full of mirrors and images of images repeating. But in this sequence, we get almost the opposite happening, where she's ribbing him into doing things. It's almost like Oatman's trying to convince him not to do them. But I don't know if that's...
I think that's true. No, I think that's absolutely true, because I think Marcella is worried about Blank. Oatman is worried about everybody else. About
that's true.
and Oatman sees Blank as a threat, right? If Blank goes into his reunion, like, who knows what's going to happen to everybody else attending?
Yeah.
Don't give it a shot. Don't shoot anybody.
Yeah, that's the line. That's such a great line.
That's such a good line.
I love it. I mean, this is the thing. He's talking down the killer, right? This is the hostage negotiation thing, right? You tell the guy what he wants to hear, but you also start to move him from his position to the position you want as the negotiator, right? Whereas Marcella is manipulating him for the purposes of business. See, they have a business deal together, and she needs him to be focused and on the job. And the fact is that he's been going off focus. As you said, Rayna, in a previous episode, when was the last success? None of the kills we see him attempt in this film, he succeeds. He's not, as far as we're aware, he hasn't had a successful job completion in a while.
Except when he's not doing it as a job. He's successful when he has to protect himself or others.
Yes.
Which is just, it's a wonderful inversion of what he should be good at.
Yes. And it also speaks to the notion of what Americans consider heroic, right? The good guy with a gun, like the person who protects the people they love or themselves is acceptable. That's fine.
Yes.
But when you're Grocer and you're willing to shoot anything and anybody, it's a different matter. And again, that's part of the fun of the film, is that sort of careful but not very detailed exploration of American, masculinity in action through action films and through romantic comedies. Because that's the other thing. He does not tell Debbie, or once she doesn't believe him, he stops worrying about it, right? He's just going to be the guy he used to be, because that's going to get her back.
Sure.
And and we're this far into the film, and she still doesn't know that he actually wasn't joking. And what's her response going to be, right? Yeah, she was punky. Yeah, she was his best mate at school, and they all had their little in-jokes together, and the music that they liked together, and all the rest of it. What's going to happen, when she finds out? That he's scared of that. He's really scared of that. Which is why he's working so hard to try and tamp that down before he goes. But his anxiety is off the charts. And of course, unlike Grocer, who's happy to take the medication and move on, he's on the phone to Oatman. I can't see Grocer on the phone to a psychiatrist. Yes, he's got a neurophysiologist. It's biology, man.
But that's a different interpretation of the same impulse, isn't it? Yeah. A different way of trying to assert control in a difficult situation, emotionally difficult situation.
Very masculine way of doing things. Like, I'll take the pill, you know?
And that makes this use of this, maybe what you were saying before, Hugh, about the way Grosse Pointe Blank and Armitage manage the shifts in tone and genre, comes in those moments with Oatman, comes in using him as an interlocutor for the audience to allow him to ask questions of Martin and to suggest things to Martin to help shift from one genre to another.
Ooh, I like that. I had not thought of that. That's a
yes, you did, because you said it. I'm just paraphrasing.
Okay, so I it was there beneath what I was thinking, but you put it out. Thank you. I had not really consciously worked out that that's what I was saying. Wow.
Because if you think about it, Oatman provides us with a third genre.
Oh, the self-help film.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because that's a very, and again, going back to the 70s, that whole thing of the psychiatrist. Oh, wow.
Because so I kind of wonder if that's the intermediary you need to get from the hitman to the rom-com.
See, that's really interesting because that's not what they do in The Sopranos.
No, it's not.
And when you and the year after this, you get Analyze This and Analyze That, and they don't do that either. Or you know, so this is the only film where that's the line they take. The psychiatrist is the way back, not the way out. Because you know, in the mob films, it's about trying to get the mobster to basically deal with the fact that he's not been a good guy, and it's time to back out of that life. But in this case, which sounds on the surface to be the same, but actually it's not the same, because in those mob films they already have a family, and they have kids, and they have the so-called normal life, and they don't understand why that's not enough to make them feel okay. Whereas Martin's got none of that at all. And it's almost like, given that they're both on the phone, and given that he turns to both of them, and between the two calls we have the image of Debbie on the window, on sitting on the windowsill. It's they're also like good angel, bad angel, good angel and demon, right? Marcella's the demon saying, do the job, kill the guy, come home, it's okay. And Oatman weirdly is well, he's God, isn't he? He's the angel. He's the good guy. He looks like God. I mean, there's something about casting a bald Jewish actor as a psychiatrist that makes you sort of think. There's an in joke there somewhere. I'm not sure, but he does kind of,
a little off of the piece. But do we feel like Dr. Jacoby in Twin Peaks is much closer to Oatman in this regard, in that he's not actually trying to dissuade any of the people that he speaks to from their course of action? He is just a sounding board for them, not necessarily an enabler, but not providing that direction to morality or that judgment away from their current path.
I mean, psychiatry, obviously big in the 50s, and American movies start to get to grips with, the whole notion of psychology itself, and there's this big, belovedness of Freudianism and all the rest of it, and this leaks into films, and we get the psychological westerns, and then we get the dramas, etc., etc. And then, but by the time you fast forward to the 60s and then into the 70s, and we have, it's all a bit more suspect, right? Psychiatrists are always turning up in horror movies and thrillers and violence, and we get the whole like De Palma and Hitchcock doing their thing with it. And then you get into the 80s, and it's like, well, what comes next, right? There's we see there's not as many psychiatrists in films, and if anything, they start to become, if not villainized, they certainly start to be pushed to a certain side of
sorry to interrupt. We start to see them a lot more in the horror genre from the 70s onwards.
Yeah, and
that tells you a lot, I suspect. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. It's almost like there's a kind of a concern that, again, America but also Western masculinity in general, and some Asian masculinity as well. This idea, he's talking about your feelings too macho, right? Or to use modern internet parlance, is, hey guys, is it gay if you talk about your feelings? It's like, it's that thing, right? And you get mixed reactions in the film. Some films want to make them, they'll turn out to be the actual killer at the end, kind of thing. And then other films are like, no, this is all part and parcel of what it is. But given where this film comes, and given that suddenly this is in the water and there's a lot of this going on, right? There's a lot of people thinking, oh yeah. I always feel like there's two reasons for that. One is the amount of screenwriters who've now been to psychiatrists. So they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to put that in my next script. Therapy is a thing in Hollywood at this point, right? So it's leaking into the films. But I think the other part of it is also, as we've said, it's trying to find a new way of looking at, for Gen X, in the absence, latchkey kid. We've seen that the parents are somewhat distant. We've seen that what's happening to his mum. He doesn't have parental influence at this stage, right? So he's seeking parental influence. And as you said earlier, Marcella is almost like a big sister, right? But she's also, she's also pushing him in like ways that aren't very healthy for him, and somehow yet also trying to look after him. It's weird, right? And then we get Oatman, who's just like, dude, just stop.
Yeah.
Just stop, right?
And I think that might be, rather than machismo or anything in that kind of area, I think for me, Oatman's role here isn't necessarily paternal. It's just, it is a moral voice.
Yeah.
In a film where that's not, where you have one genre which is highly moralistic, the rom-com, and
yes,
one, the assassin hitman kind of heist kind of crime movie,
yeah,
where the morality is just not on the map. So he can sit in between those two things and be the pinion that gets you from one to the other.
Yeah, maybe? that sounds spot on. Actually, I like that a lot. That really nails it. Because morality. You're right. All the so-called, because if Gross is the nearest thing he had to a father figure or a moral voice in his life, man, is he screwed. Marcella's only slightly better, right? I don't know, man. I think you're right. I think that's the thing, isn't it? The rom-com represents the rom-com element of the film has to represent so much here. It's not necessarily normality, but it's something more normal than the life he is living. It's a chance to redo the past that he screwed up. It's a chance to stop doing what he is doing, even though he's good at what he's doing. And all this sort of thing. So I like that. I like the idea of Oatman as the moral voice, because after all, that Martin went to him. Martin sought him out, as he's a specialist on PTSD from the sounds of the book titles. So that shows that Martin must want some kind of change deep down, I guess.
Sounds good.
All right.
Indeed. Should we call it there?
Yeah.
Let's do it. Yeah. Okay,
so,
this was minute 65 of the Grosse Pointe Blank podcast, Debi Radio 79.5 FM, featuring co-hosts, co-writers, and co-producers Dev Soligar and myself, Hugh David.
Today's guest has been Dr. Rayna Denison. Rayna, where can we find out more about you?
Well, I work at the University of Bristol, and I would love for people to get in touch. You can get my email from the University of Bristol website.
Fantastic. You can find us on all good podcast players, as well as YouTube, X, and Spotify at Debi Radio, and on our website, debiradio.com. And for all of those, it is Debi spelled Debi, just like in the movie.
And finally, if you want to have a chat with us, come and find us on the Facebook listeners group, which is once again Debi Radio, but this time Debi Radio 79.5 FM Fan Club. So Debi Radio, Debi Radio 79.5 FM.
Sure was clear that all of this was new. Concentrating hard like a little girl, smoking for the first time. It wasn't a moment, it was a feeling.